Hey guys, and welcome to another video featuring some of the most hilarious phonies or non-words ever played in Scrabble. Our first example features a game played between Josh Sokol and Andy Wong at this year's Scrabble Players Championship held in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, in this position, Josh is up 55 points, there's one tile in the bag, and there is a blank, so he needs to be a little bit careful because if Andy is able to bingo out, he'll probably score enough points to win the game. Now, Josh sees this open IN on the L column here, and he's concerned that Andy might maybe be able to play a 9-letter word through those two tiles and bingo out and win, so he decides to play puns over here for 27 points, blocking that line. And as he mentions here, this is a mistake because he didn't see that Andy could have played eviction through this I in eroticas if the U had been in the bag. However, Josh actually missed something else here because the U wasn't in the bag, the E was in the bag, so Andy's rack was blank CINOUV. And while Josh blocked 9-letter words through the IN, he actually opened up the possibility for 10-letter words through the INN, even crazier. And Andy capitalizes immediately, slapping down vuccinini for 106 points, bringing him to 502, well above Josh's score, and seemingly winning the game in spectacular fashion. However, the problem is, vuccinini's not a word. Sad. So, reasonable effort by Andy there. I mean, yeah, he definitely did lose some spread, but I guess you never know. If vuccinini happened to have been valid, that would have been probably one of the greatest Scrabble victories pretty much of all time. So, yeah, of course Josh just went out over here and won the game handily. But, yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Our next example features a game between Joey Malik and Paul Epstein, two very strong experts. And it's a very close game. Paul is up 14 points, but it's Joey's turn, and there are only 2 tiles left in the bag. So the game is quickly coming to a close, and the next couple of plays are going to be pivotal in deciding the outcome of the game. And Joey finds a really nice play on his turn, forming the word C down here on the 14th row, making several vertical insertions. He forms the words of bice, hoe, and cotter, all at the same time, scoring 45 points. Now, there's only one problem with this play, and the problem, as you might guess, is cotter is not a word. So this quickly comes off the board. Now, the reason I thought this was really hilarious is the reasoning why Joey played this. He, of course, did not think cotter was a word, but as he mentions here, he thought the Q was an O. And I love the way he phrased this. I've known the Q needed that little tail that an O doesn't possess since my earliest years of Sesame Street viewing. So, pretty wild here. Joey thought that the Q was an O, and I guess they look kind of similar, but in any case, I don't know if I've ever seen another example where somebody thought a tile on the board was another tile. I've definitely heard of examples where somebody thought a blank was supposed to represent a different tile than it actually did. That happens somewhat often, but I don't know if I've ever seen another case of somebody actually mistaking one real tile for another real tile. But yeah, in any case, pretty hilarious stuff. Unfortunately for Joey, this did prove to be a very costly mistake. Paul noticed and challenged it off the board, and as I mentioned, in this close a game, every play is super important, so definitely a lost turn for Joey was extremely costly, and Paul would go on to win this game quite comfortably. Our next example here features Josh Sokol. In this game, he's playing against expert player Craig Rowland, and the score is pretty even. It's still quite early in the game. And Josh probably should play something in the top right corner, hooking an A onto the word luff that Craig just played to make luffa. He could play something like panic or catnip there for a pretty good score. However, Josh missed the A hook and instead came up with another clever idea, extending the word brew already on the board to form the play of pint a brew for 32 points. So a pretty cool idea here, definitely not an easy play to think of, extending a word like brew already on the board. However, the problem is pint a brew is not a word, and Craig challenges this off. So Josh ends up scoring 0 points instead of 32. And the funniest part about this play, and the main reason I'm posting it, is the reason why Josh played it. So as he notes in his comments, pint a brew is someone's ISC handle. Now, for those viewers who aren't familiar with ISC, it's short for the Internet Scrabble Club, and it's an online venue where people can play Scrabble against one another. These days, most top players play on woogles.io, but before Woogles was created a couple of years ago, ISC was the main place where tournament players would play one another. So Josh, myself, many other top players used to frequent the Internet Scrabble Club. and pint brew was the handle or username of a player who was typically ranked quite highly there. I'm not actually sure if they were a tournament player or somebody who didn't play tournaments but was just quite good at online Scrabble. In any case, pint brew was a pretty well-known ISC handle, and somehow I guess Josh thought it was a valid word. And I can't help but wonder what was going through Craig's mind when Josh made this absurd-looking play of pint brew. I don't remember if Craig used to play on ISC. If he did, he was probably at least familiar with the pint brew username, but would have realized that this was not actually a real word, but just a reference to beer. If he didn't play on ISC, then he was probably completely thrown for a loop and just absolutely befuddled. So, yeah, I don't know. Craig, if you're watching this, let us know what your thoughts were when Josh played pint brew in this position. Our next example here features a game played between two strong experts, Ricky Serrois and Chloe Fatsis. In this position, it's Chloe's turn, and she's got many available bingos. She could play something like Oracles or Solacer down the F column, next to the A in Antimere. She could also play Carolers through this R in Growths horizontally. But Chloe finds an even higher scoring option, making the play of Corrales through the R, doubling the C and scoring 78 points. And this looks like a great play at first, however, the problem is, Corrales is not a word, and Ricky challenges this off the board. Now, Chloe does mention that she saw Carolers as well as the valid 7-letter words, but then saw Corrales, and it looked a little bit weird to her at first, but then she did end up convincing herself that it was a valid word. Now, I have a theory for why Chloe came up with Corrales in this position. Corrales happens to be the name of a town in New Mexico not too far from Albuquerque, and while proper nouns are of course generally not acceptable in Scrabble, Corrales happens to have special significance in regard to Scrabble. Namely, it is the site of an annual Scrabble tournament known as Swillens, held every year very graciously by Mike Barron at his house in Corrales, New Mexico. And it's an amazing tournament. I actually went for the first time this past summer and had an awesome trip. So to all the tournament players watching this video, I highly recommend you check out that tournament if you haven't already. In any case, what I imagine must have happened is Chloe saw Corrales on her rack and she just got a little bit confused about whether Corrales was actually a valid word or the name of a place where she has played Scrabble before. And she ended up losing a turn, and it's worth mentioning here, Ricky makes a very smart play. On his next rack, he has several bingos available through the R in Growths. He can play either mini bars or binarism, and binarism at first looks like a better play. It scores more points because it reaches the double word score with the M. However, mini bars is a significantly better play in this position, as Chloe notes here, and that's what Ricky played because it blocks all of Chloe's available bingos. Of course, Chloe just played a phony bingo, so Ricky knows her full rack. And mini bars blocks not only carolers, but also all of the F column bingos that I was mentioning before that Chloe would have had available. Now, binarism would have also blocked the F column bingos, as the B would have been right here. But the problem is, Chloe could have hooked binarism with an S and played either Escolar or Solacer, making binarisms down the N column for a lot of points. So, very, very smart play by Ricky, and well done to him for taking advantage of the knowledge he gleaned from Chloe's phony. Our next example features none other than Matt Kanik, who has been the star of some of my other videos. And in this position, against Josh Sokol, Matt makes the play of Bricth, B-R-I-C-T-H, for 26 points. Now, Bricth is very much not a word, and Josh quickly challenges it off the board. But the reason why this is so funny is it is a transposition of something that resembles a valid word. And for those of you who watched my previous phonies video, you may remember an oddly similar play made by Matthew Tunnicliffe. In that video, Matthew played Disetced, D-I-S-E-T-C-E-D, transposing the T and the C from dissected. However, dissected would have still required a second S to be valid, so in that way, it was a transposition of something that resembled a valid word. The same thing happened here. Matt thought he was playing Britch, B-R-I-T-C-H. So he actually transposed the same two tiles as Matthew did with Disetced. He transposes the C and the T, just like Matthew did, and Britch is not a valid word. Of course, Britches is valid. It's a fairly well-known term used to refer to an article of clothing. However, it needs the ES to be valid. It's what Scrabblers would call sticky S. So Britches is valid, but Britch alone is not. So really, really strange how similar these two plays were. Not only were they both transpositions of something that resembled a valid word, but they were both transpositions of the same two tiles, the C and the T. So pretty crazy stuff, and for those of you who haven't seen the Dissect Kid play yet, I will post a link in the description below, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Our next and final example features a game played between Josh Sokol and none other than myself. This game was played back at the Albany, New York New Year's tournament held at the end of 2017 and beginning of 2018. And in this position, I'm up 41 points, and there's only one tile in the bag, so time is running out for Josh if he wants to mount a comeback. And he does have some promising tiles on his rack. He's got a blank and an S, but he's also got a lot of clunky tiles to go with it, in particular the W and the Y and a couple of O's. And the problem for Josh is he does have a couple tiles to work with on the right for bingoing, specifically the N, E, and A in apnea if he wants to make an 8. But it's easy for me to block all of them at the same time. So for instance, if Josh fishes off one tile to try to bingo out, then I'm just going to make a play either through this E vertically right here, or above or below the N, E, and A in apnea horizontally like this, and that'll block all three lines at the same time and leave Josh with nowhere to bingo, and I'll presumably just win in the endgame quite easily. So because of that, Josh decided if he wanted any chance of winning this game, he needed to bingo immediately, and that's exactly what he did, making the play of non-snowy through the N for 80 points. Now, I pretty quickly challenged this off. I was quite confident it wasn't a word, so this came off the board, and I would go on to win this game easily, bingoing with Snarlier and then winning by about 100 or so in the endgame. Now, it's worth mentioning, as Josh describes here in this comment, he actually had a path to victory besides trying the phony of non-snowy. And if we go back to this position, what Josh needed to do was make the play of swoon from this S in quads down here for 16 points. And it looks like a pretty strange play at first. He's only scoring 16, and he's also emptying the bag in a way that'll only leave him 4 tiles on his rack, so he'll of course have no chance to bingo. And not only that, it seems to give back big plays to me on the bottom right, especially if I have the X, since I'll be able to play the X right here under the first O in swoon, probably with something like EX or XI, and score a lot of points. So it seems like a pretty counterproductive play. However, the idea here is that the X can actually be Josh's saving grace. He needs to play this hoping specifically to draw the X, because if he draws the X, then his final rack in the endgame is going to be blank SYX, and he's going to be threatening 2 massive outplays. One of them is going to be the word zist on the right here, hooking swoons and making the blank a T. That'll score a massive amount of points because he'll be doubling the X on the double letter and then tripling the word with the blank T. That'll score over 70. And he also has as a backup, if I block that, the very sneaky play of zisti down the D column to this I in blitz, which will hook scum and also score about 50 points. So a really amazing idea for Josh, and I actually can't quite outrun. My best play, if he does this, would be to play something like raise on the bottom right over here, hooking swoon. And that would fall just short, because after swoon horizontally and then raise vertically, then Josh will go out with zisti, as I mentioned, and Josh would actually win by a mere 2 points in that position. So pretty wild stuff, and super hard to see, especially it's so counterintuitive to hope specifically for the X. But as Josh mentions here in his comment, the crazy thing is it would have worked, because as we saw, I bingoed with Snarlier. I didn't have the X. The X happened to be the one tile in the bag. So the probability of that happening from Josh's perspective was only 1 in 8. But it just goes to show you, 1 in 8 is certainly not 0, and you never know. So a pretty crazy missed opportunity for Josh, but really hard to see, so I can't blame him for trying the phony of non-snowy. And it's worth mentioning, too, that this is actually a fairly ironic phony given the circumstances. As I mentioned, this tournament was held in Albany, New York over the New Year's Day holiday. So, as you can imagine, it was quite cold outside, and it was very much not non-snowy. In fact, we'd had a pretty big snowstorm a couple of days before this game was played. So, pretty ironic choice of phony here for Josh, given the circumstances. I don't really think that was a factor at all in my deciding to challenge. I mean, for one, I knew I had to challenge if I wanted to win, and I also just kind of knew this wasn't a word, but still pretty ironic that he played non-snowy given the circumstances. But yeah, pretty wild stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed this example and the video as a whole. That'll be it for this one, but I will hopefully be back soon with even more phonies. So thanks again for watching, guys, and have a good one. Bye-bye.